Hey guys, tonight we drift into the soft hum of waves that seem to speak. Imagine the ocean at midnight, the horizon erased, stars trembling like sparks on black glass. You close your eyes and hear it, that low, endless murmur that sounds suspiciously like a cathedral choir humming from somewhere under the sea. Maybe it's the tide, or maybe it's a memory older than civilization itself. You've heard the name before, Atlantis, but tonight, you're not hearing it from Plato or some history podcast. You're hearing it from the waves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing which corner of the world is drifting off with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're floating not on a ship, but in a dream, that half-aware kind of dream where the sea seems infinite, and the moon looks close enough to touch. Beneath you something glimmers, rows of marble columns, the faint outline of streets. It's almost like staring down into a submerged city. The water ripples and shifts, and for a split second the ruins move as though alive. When you blink, they're gone. Historians still argue whether Plato invented Atlantis as a parable, a moral lesson wrapped in myth, or whether he was describing a real event distorted by time. You probably won't survive long if you dive down there to check, but the human brain loves a good mystery, and few stories have been harder to let go of. The tale first appeared in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE. Describing an advanced island civilization that angered the gods and sank in a single day and night of misfortune. What's odd is that the story didn't stay ancient. It crawled out of philosophy and into medieval legend, into crusader songs and monkish scribbles, into the whispering pages of books that shouldn't have known anything about it. You're walking now, the dream shifts, placing you on a wind-beaten coast. Maybe Cornwall, maybe Brittany. The cliffs are jagged, the air salted and sharp. A storm builds out at sea, and as lightning flashes, you think you see towers far beyond the surf, just shapes, blurred and impossible. Your guide, a cloaked figure with a lantern, mutters, "They say the city still breathes when the tide turns." He's not wrong. The medieval world was full of half-remembered geographies. Back then, maps were works of imagination as much as observation. The world beyond the known coasts wasn't blank. It was filled with monsters, floating islands, and hints of lost lands. A mainstream fact. Even as late as the 15th century, some European cartographers marked an island called Antillia in the Atlantic, a phantom land that vanished from maps once the Americas were charted. Many historians now think Antillia was the medieval echo of Plato's Atlantis, carried across centuries of retelling. But others say it's a coincidence. Historians still argue whether the monks of Lisbon who first drew it were copying real navigators' reports or merely sketching hope. You crouch beside your cloaked guide as he points toward the horizon. "They called it the Isle of Seven Cities," he says, "where bishops fled from the Moors and built a paradise. It's one of those fringe tidbits that sits perfectly between faith and fantasy, the belief that holy men escaped catastrophe and built a hidden utopia across the sea. You can almost see them, those exiled bishops in their stone cloisters, lighting candles against the endless Atlantic darkness." The dream deepens. You walk along the sand and shells crunch underfoot. They glint in the moonlight, not gray or white, but faintly golden, as if dusted with memory. The air feels old, heavy with stories. You can almost hear them. A whisper from somewhere deep inside the surf says, "We were real once." Of course, that's the trick of the mind. Human imagination loves to fill gaps. Every age has tried to locate Atlantis, from the deserts of Libya to the icy shelves of Antarctica. But in the medieval world, the ocean was still vast and unknowable, the perfect place to hide both monsters and miracles. You follow a seabird inland and find ruins not of Atlantis, but of an old Roman fort half buried in dune grass. The stones are saltine, yet you can see fish motifs carved into them. A strange continuity flickers there. Civilizations rise, fall, and leave behind fragments that confuse the next dreamers. It's like cultural archaeology conducted in the dark. Maybe that's what the story really is. Humanity's recurring déjà vu, the instinct that we've done this before, built too much, reached too high, drowned under our own brilliance. The waves crash harder. You feel droplets hit your face. The sea wind smells faintly metallic, like rain mixed with ancient coins. In the lightning, the horizon blurs again, and you see faint domes under the surface. Columns. A staircase winding downward. The city beneath the sea exhales bubbles that rise like tiny ghosts. You take a step closer, and the ground trembles. It's not an earthquake, it's memory resurfacing. Once upon a time, philosophers used Atlantis as a warning about arrogance. Medieval dreamers, though, transformed it into a beacon proof that perfection once existed and might again. Think of it as the Middle Ages version of a sci-fi utopia, complete with moral overtones and divine justice. Your cloaked guide leans closer. Atlantis is not lost, he whispers. It sleeps. The lightning fades. The water calms. You find yourself staring into the reflection of the moon, distorted by the tide. You reach down, touch it, and the reflection ripples into the face of a marble statue. The eyes open. You blink awake and you're no longer on the beach. You're in a monastic library. Candles burn low, parchment crackles, and the same hum of the sea echoes faintly through the stone walls. The transition makes no sense, but that's how dreams work. Maybe the library is a new layer of the same memory. Maybe it's the real beginning. Before you can ask, a monk slides a map across the table. On it, drawn in rust-brown ink, is an island shaped like a spiral shell. Its name, in faded Latin, reads Insula Atlantides. You ask him where he got it. He smiles. From the waves, he says. The bell tolls outside, deep and mournful, and the candlelight flickers like the reflection of lightning. The dream continues, carrying you deeper into this forgotten empire's echo. You don't know yet, but this is where the search truly begins, in parchment, salt, and moonlight. The candle still burns beside you, thin smoke curling upward like a question mark that refuses to fade. You're sitting at a desk of uneven oak, the edges smooth from centuries of elbows and ink stains. The monk's map still glows faintly in the dim light, its spiral-shaped island shimmering as though the ink hasn't dried in 500 years. He's gone now, leaving only the faint smell of beeswax and parchment. You lean closer, tracing the curved coastline drawn in painstaking detail. Mountains like spines, rivers like veins. It looks impossibly real, and yet you know it shouldn't be. Outside, the monastery sleeps. Wind presses against the shutters with the rhythm of slow breathing. Somewhere, water drips, steady, hypnotic, like a ticking clock without hands. You realize the entire world in here feels off balance, as if the air itself remembers something it shouldn't. You whisper to yourself, the mapmaker's secret. That's what it feels like you've stumbled into, a secret that shouldn't have survived. You rise from the desk, candle in hand, and follow the corridor's dim flicker. Stone arches stretch overhead, their ribs crossing like the bones of an ancient creature. Along the walls, murals of saints and sea monsters blur together, and one of them, just one, shows a haloed figure standing before a city half submerged in waves. It's the 12th century, or maybe the 13th. You're not sure anymore, because in this dreamlike drift through time, the centuries blur like watercolor. What you do know is that the man who drew this map, Brother Morris of the Abbey of St. Albans, was very real. His surviving manuscripts show remarkable skill, the kind of detail that suggests someone had seen the world more widely than a monk usually could. A mainstream fact, medieval mapmakers didn't simply draw coastlines, they drew theologies. A map wasn't geography, it was philosophy in color. Jerusalem sat at the center, Eden often appeared at the top, and the edges of the world bloomed with imagination. For Morris to sketch a vast island west of the Pillars of Hercules, modern Gibraltar, wasn't heresy, it was hope. But here, the odd part. The inks used on this map contain traces of crushed malachite and a pigment known as Egyptian blue, both rare, expensive, and out of place in a remote English abbey. You can almost picture Morris hunched over his desk, grinding minerals that shimmer like tiny oceans, trying to recapture a glow that he swore he once saw. Historians still argue whether these extra pigments suggest influence from Islamic mapmakers in Spain, or something stranger. Maybe Morris copied a fragment of an older chart, one whispered about in ports and monasteries but never spoken of openly. You find a note scrawled in the margin, half erased by time: De insula quisumniat sub mare. The island that dreams beneath the sea. It sounds poetic, too poetic for a monk, but maybe that's the point. You step into another chamber where a massive globe rests under a velvet cloth. When you lift it, dust swirls, catching candlelight like fireflies. It's carved wood, not paper, a kind of early attempt at three-dimensional mapping. But the strangest thing, there's a faint groove, a circle etched deep in the Atlantic, labeled only with a cross. Someone tried to erase it. You lean closer, brushing away centuries of grime, and there it is again, Atlantis or something very like it. A single word scratched in Latin so fine it's nearly invisible: Atlantes. And suddenly, you can imagine Morris, trembling as he carved it, knowing he was defying both reason and religion. After all, the church frowned upon speculation that didn't serve scripture. To map a land that wasn't in Genesis was to flirt with blasphemy. Maybe that's why he hid it in spiral form, Atlantis disguised as metaphor. Your candle flickers, and for a second the inked island seems to shimmer again, like sunlight refracted through water. You blink, and the air feels damp, heavy, almost salty. The candle flame bends as though caught in a breeze that isn't there. And then you hear it. A sound faint but distinct, scratching. It's coming from the map itself. You hold your breath. The scratching grows into a slow, circular scraping like a quill moving across parchment. Then faintly, a voice murmurs in Old Latin, words you can't quite understand, though you recognize one: mare, sea. When you look again, there's a new line drawn across the map, a line that wasn't there before. It stretches westward, curling toward nothingness. You whisper, half amused, "This better not turn into a ghost story." That's joke number one, because let's face it, you're in a candle-lit monastery with a haunted map. It's either a ghost story or the best episode of medieval X-Files ever. You blow out the candle, pocket the map, and step outside into the cloister garden. The moonlight paints everything silver. You can hear the sea again, though you're miles inland. Maybe it's imagination, maybe it's memory. There's a figure sitting by the fountain, a young apprentice mapmaker, ink-stained hands folded in his lap. When he sees you, he smiles faintly, like someone who's been waiting centuries to be asked the right question. "Brother Morris dreamed of an island," he says softly. "Said he saw it in reflection upside down under the sea. Said it called to him." "Did he find it?" you ask. The apprentice shakes his head. He vanished. One night his cell was empty. Only his quills were left, still dripping blue. You both fall silent, the wind carrying the faint sound of waves again. It's an old story, one easily dismissed as monastic legend. Yet the details linger: pigments that shouldn't exist, maps that mark nothing real, men who disappear chasing what reason forbids. You think of later centuries, of sailors in the 1400s claiming to see ghostly islands, of Columbus carrying secret charts that hinted at lands not yet known. The line between history and imagination is thinner than parchment. There's a quirky tidbit that fits perfectly here. Some medieval scholars genuinely believed the Atlantic Ocean contained mirror lands, reflections of the continents we know, inverted beneath the waves. To sail far enough west, they said, was to find the other side of reality itself. The apprentice glances toward the horizon, his voice barely audible. "Maybe he just went home," he murmurs. You look at him, puzzled. He smiles again, eyes reflecting moonlight. "If Atlantis fell into the sea, then those who remember it must dream in salt water." That's joke number 2, though it's more melancholy than funny. You chuckle softly anyway, because it's the kind of line only a medieval poet would consider comforting. A bell tolls in the distance. The sound rolls through the air like thunder underwater. The apprentice fades, literally like ink washed from vellum, and you're left alone in the moonlit garden. You unfold the map again. The spiral island seems to pulse faintly, as though responding to the bell. Beneath your fingertips, the ink feels warm. A wave crashes, though there's no ocean nearby. The world blurs, stone melting into saltwater blue, and you realize the dream is carrying you onward, deeper into the current of history, where monks become navigators and myth becomes motive. The map is changing hands now, passing from cloister to court, from scholar to knight, from secret to obsession. Somewhere beyond this monastery, someone else will pick up the trail. Someone who believes that Atlantis isn't a ruin but a kingdom worth reclaiming. For now, though, you linger in the echo of the bell, wondering whether the mapmaker's secret was ever really his to keep, or whether the sea itself just borrowed his hand to finish its story. The last candle gutters out. You hear one final whisper, soft as surf through stone, "Draw the way home." The bell's echo hasn't faded yet when you feel yourself walking again, barefoot now, across a floor of cool stone tiles that ripple like shallow water under moonlight. The dream has shifted, but not ended. You're still in the monastery, or maybe you've moved forward in time, deeper into its memory. The air hums with age. A corridor unfolds before you, lined with wooden doors, each slightly ajar. From behind them comes the faint scratching of quills, the turning of parchment, and once in a while, the low murmur of prayer. You realize you've entered the library of shadows. It isn't on any map. Monks here don't copy the Bible or Aristotle, they copy what they shouldn't. You step inside. The space feels endless. Candles hang in glass spheres, their flames suspended in smoky halos. Shelves rise to dizzying heights, and between them, robed figures glide silently, faces hidden by hoods. You can smell dust, beeswax, and that strange ocean tang again, like salt trapped in vellum. You trail your fingers along a stack of books, their titles barely visible in Latin abbreviations. De Profundis Oceani, Tractatus de Insula Submersis, Liber Silenta. These aren't ordinary works of theology. They're catalogs of what doesn't officially exist. A librarian approaches, thin, tall, eyes as pale as candle flame. He says nothing, just hands you a volume bound in dark leather, its spine marked with a tiny seashell pressed into the cover. When you open it, the script is impossibly fine, written in 2 alternating inks, black for words, silver for names. You read a line aloud. "The island spoke once more in the dreams of men." The librarian nods approvingly. "Atlantis," he murmurs, "though we call it by other names, Atalanth, Aztlan, Antalya. Each age remembers it differently, but it's always the same island wearing a new mask." A mainstream fact. During the 12th and 13th centuries, European scholars rediscovered many ancient Greek texts through Arabic translations. Some works by Plato, including the Timaeus, were known in fragmentary form. It's entirely plausible that a monk, somewhere in southern France or Italy, could have glimpsed the tale of Atlantis in a half-understood copy, then reinterpreted it through Christian allegory. But here in the Library of Shadows, things don't stay that simple. The librarian flips to another page where a diagram spreads across the vellum, concentric circles labeled with cryptic symbols. "City of rings," he says. "Plato spoke of 3, land, water, and wall, but our records mention 7. You tilt the page, the rings seem to move. Historians still argue whether this idea of Atlantis as a 7-fold city was an invention of medieval mystics. he continues softly, or a survival of something older. Some say the number corresponds to the heavens, others to the sins. That's your first joke opportunity. So, what you're telling me Atlantis was a heavenly Vegas? The librarian doesn't laugh, but a faint smile twitches beneath his hood, like someone who recognizes humor as a lesser form of heresy. You wander deeper into the stacks. The silence here isn't empty, it's layered, full of listening. Every now and then you glimpse strange diagrams. Ships shaped like stars, coral towers drawn with gold leaf, maps written upside down. You find one chart so water-stained it looks alive, like the ink itself is still flowing, tides captured in motion. You turn a corner and discover a table where two scholars debate in hushed voices. One argues Atlantis fell because it defied God's order. The other insists it was punished not for arrogance, but for forgetting gratitude. Their words fade into Latin murmurs as you pass, though one phrase lingers in your mind. Non periet est dormit. It did not perish but sleeps. That line feels like a key. The librarian reappears at your shoulder. There are those who say the sea is not a grave, he whispers, but a vault. You turn, startled. He's holding a different book, now smaller, wrapped in oilcloth. He opens it carefully, and inside, a single page bears an illustration, a chalice submerged in waves. Around it swirl tiny Latin annotations, references to light, fire, and resurrection. He glances up. Do you see? They believed the wisdom of Atlantis was sealed away until the world was ready to learn from its ruin. You can't help but grin. Sounds like a medieval version of a save file. That's your second joke. The librarian doesn't get it, but that's okay. Humor doesn't travel well across centuries. He closes the book and leans close enough for you to see the reflection of candlelight in his eyes. Some of us still believe the sea keeps records, he says quietly. Not on parchment, but in memory, layers of silt and salt that remember everything drowned within them. And with that, he fades into shadow. You stand alone in the aisle, the silence now heavy as sleep. The books seem to breathe. You notice a peculiar pattern. Each shelf number includes a letter A stylized as a trident. You follow the markings until you reach a wall that isn't a wall at all. It's a door disguised as stone. You push, and it opens into a circular chamber lit by blue-green light. The air feels colder here. In the center stands a basin filled with water, perfectly still. Above it, suspended by chains, hangs a cracked mirror. The reflection it casts is wrong. The library appears in it, yes, but reversed, and in that reflection, the shelves aren't made of wood but coral. You see fish gliding between them, and the ceiling arches like a seashell's ribs. This is what the librarian meant, the sea as archive. You touch the mirror. Ripples spread across its surface, and suddenly you hear hundreds of voices whispering in unison, languages you don't understand, yet they sound familiar, like lullabies sung underwater. You hear one phrase clearly, "Remember us." It's overwhelming, the voices, the salt in the air, the feeling that every drowned civilization is speaking at once. You pull back, gasping. And then the mirror stills. The basin's surface clears, revealing faint letters glowing beneath the water. Atlantis non-period. Atlantis did not perish. You exhale slowly, half-dazed. The air smells faintly metallic again, like lightning over waves. The library begins to fade around you, shelves dissolving into mist. For a moment, you think you see shapes rising through the vapor, figures in armor, banners rippling underwater, light glinting off impossible domes. Nights, cities, dreams. The mirror's last whisper follows you out. Every age remembers what it fears to repeat. That's joke number 3, you murmur. Well, good thing humanity totally learned its lesson about arrogance and hubris as you step back into the corridor. The echo answers with what might be laughter, or just the sea breathing through stone. The world shimmers. The books melt into sand, the walls into surf. You're no longer in the monastery. You're standing on a rocky shore again, holding the silver and black manuscript in your hands. The wind rises, smelling of rain and ink. The pages flutter open to that seven-ring diagram once more, and now you notice something new, small letters scrawled at the bottom. You kneel, squinting to read them. They form a sentence, barely legible, but enough to send a chill through you. Seek the knights who bear the sunken crown. The tide laps at your feet. In the distance, thunder rumbles, low and steady like a summons. The next part of the dream is calling. The library of shadows has given you the map, and now the world outside will start to move. You wake, or rather, you surface, to the feeling of hooves pounding the earth beneath you. Dust fills the air, mingling with the clang of metal and the shout of men who believe the world can still be conquered by conviction alone. You're riding now, beneath a sun that burns like polished brass, your cloak snapping behind you in the desert wind. The dream has shifted again, carrying you to a time when faith and legend shared a single heartbeat. The Crusades have begun. All around you banners ripple, lions, crosses, stars, and crescents, each one fluttering like a prayer on fabric. To your left, a knight in white surcoat adjusts the chain coif beneath his helmet. His armor gleams, but his eyes are weary. He turns to you and says, "We ride not for Jerusalem today. Our quest is west." You blink, west. He nods, "For the sunken crown." So here you are, swept into the strange and secret world of the Knights of the Sunken Crown, a brotherhood that history forgot, or perhaps deliberately erased. The road you follow cuts through dry valleys where stone glows red in the dusk. The order you ride with is small, fewer than 20 men, but they carry themselves with an odd calm, as if they already know they won't be returning. Their leader, Sir Ector of Tours, bears a symbol you recognize from the map's margin, a spiral of 7 rings. It's etched into the hilt of his sword, too deliberate to be decoration. He catches you looking and smiles faintly. "Do you know what it means?" You shake your head. "It's said to be the seal of a city that fell before Babel was built," he says, "a mark of those who sought light in the deeps." A mainstream fact slips in here. Among medieval secret orders, symbolism was currency. The real Knights Templar, for instance, used twin horsemen on one mount to represent poverty and brotherhood, though later myths turned that into something far more mystical. But this spiral symbol, no known order used it. Some researchers think it originated from a fringe sect of crusaders who settled in Portugal after being excommunicated. Others think it never existed at all. Historians still argue whether such Atlantis orders were allegorical cults or early maritime societies obsessed with lost technology. But in the dream, these knights are very real, and they're heading for the edge of the known world. By nightfall, you camp near an oasis. The knights gather around a small fire, the heat flickering across their faces like gold foil. Someone is singing softly in Old Occitan, a song that mentions a city that sleeps beneath silver waves. You catch the words Corona del Sol Cado, the crown of the fallen sun. It's beautiful and sad, the kind of melody you might hum absent-mindedly while polishing armor, never realizing it's a eulogy for something that never existed. Sir Ector kneels beside the fire and unfolds a worn piece of parchment. You recognize the same spiral diagram from the library, but here it's drawn atop a crude map of the Atlantic. "The monks call it Atlantis," he says, "but our records name it the Western Kingdom. We ride first to the sea, then to the ships that await us in Lisbon." You glance up at the stars. They look close tonight, almost too close. There's a story he tells as you travel. Long ago, a knight of his bloodline received a vision of a city drowned not in punishment, but in promise. Its king, before vanishing beneath the tide, crowned his people with rings of memory and swore they'd return when the world forgot its origin. You can't tell if it's myth or metaphor, maybe both, but when he speaks you can almost see it. Columns shimmering underwater, crowns made of coral and gold, torches that burn blue instead of red. It's hard to laugh at faith that vivid, Still, you try. So basically, you're the world's first scuba diving crusaders. That's your first joke tonight, and it earns you a grin from one of the younger knights. If the sea is holy, he replies, we go to baptize ourselves in it. Taché. Days pass. The desert gives way to olive groves, then rolling hills dotted with windmills. You ride through villages where children chase the horses, shouting for blessings. The knights say nothing to them, they're sworn to secrecy. But one drops a small bronze medallion for a child to find. You glimpse it as it falls, that same spiral symbol, catching the sunlight before vanishing in dust. That's how myths travel, you think, not through books, but through gestures too small to notice until centuries later. By the time you reach Lisbon, the city smells of salt, tallow, and hope. Ships line the harbor, masts creaking like forest trees in a storm. The order's fleet is modest, 2 cogs and a galley, but every plank gleams with fresh pitch. On the prow of one, someone has carved an inscription, Ad Ocassum et Ultra, to the sunset and beyond. You board at dawn. The sea stretches endless, a flat mirror of light. For days, the ships sail west into wind and gray mist, past the edge of any known chart. Gulls vanish. Compass needles tremble. You hear one sailor mutter, we've reached the breathing place of the world. That's joke number 2. You whisper back, well, let's hope it's not the stopping place, earning a nervous chuckle. Humor feels necessary out here, where reality seems begin to show. Then one night you're woken by a strange sound, a low, melodic hum coming from the sea itself. You stagger to the deck, half asleep, and see something glowing beneath the water. Not bioluminescent fish, not moonlight, something architectural. Domes rings. Sir Ector joins you, eyes wide but calm. The crown calls, he murmurs. The sailors panic. Some pray, others drop to their knees. The water begins to swirl, rising in concentric circles around the ship, 7 of them just like on the map. Historians still argue whether medieval mariners ever described ringed whirlpools west of Africa. Some say those reports inspired the myth of the maelstrom. But this one feels too precise, too symmetrical. Then just as suddenly the glow fades. The sea stills. Morning comes and nothing remains but a strange silence. The compasses spin uselessly, and one night claims the stars above are wrong, that constellations have shifted overnight. By noon, Sir Ector orders the ships turn back, but before they reach Europe again, half the crew vanishes. Gone. No screams, no splashes, just missing. You return to Lisbon weeks later, the survivors gaunt and hollow-eyed. Officials dismiss your story, calling it heresy or madness. The Order of the Sunken Crown is disbanded, its record sealed. And yet, a century later, a merchant ship reports finding a strange floating relic in the same waters. A sword hilt encrusted with coral, engraved with a 7-ring spiral. A quirky tidbit. In 1479, Portuguese chroniclers really did record a relic of unknown origin found adrift near the Azores, its design never identified. Some modern fringe theorists link it to a supposed Atlantean order, though no credible evidence survives. Still, coincidences make the best myths. As you leave Lisbon behind in your dream, you can feel that the story hasn't ended. The knights didn't fail, they left a message. The wind smells like salt and old bronze again. Somewhere beneath the waves, the lost city hums, patient and amused, waiting for the next generation to mistake memory for discovery. That's your third joke, you mutter. Guess even lost civilizations know how to ghost people properly. The sea doesn't laugh, but it does whisper back. The sound follows you inland, toward a cathedral whose stones still bear faint spirals, marks left by masons who might have known the same secret. And as you step inside, you realize the legend of Atlantis isn't fading. It's infiltrating, carved in capitals, sung in hymns, painted in glass. The knights may have vanished, but their dream has entered the very architecture of faith. The bells begin to toll again. You're about to see how deep that echo goes. The bells toll 9, deep and resonant, each note blooming through the vaulted air like a ripple in still water. You step into the nave of the cathedral, and it feels less like entering a building, and more like passing through a thought that someone carved into stone centuries ago. Sunlight spills through stained glass in fractured reds and sapphires. Angels hover in mid-gesture. Saints hold scrolls that gleam with faded Latin. But what catches your eye isn't the obvious iconography. It's the subtle, almost mischievous detail tucked beneath the saint's feet. Spirals. Small, delicate, deliberate. You crouch, tracing one with your fingertip. 7 rings again. A monk approaches, silent as dusk. His robe brushes the flagstones, stirring the incense haze into coils that mimic the same spiral shape. You wonder if that's coincidence or choreography. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he says softly. "The architect called them the whorls of ascent." You smile. They look more like the map of somewhere I've already been. The monk peers at you with pale eyes that seem older than the cathedral itself. Then, you've traveled further than most pilgrims. He leads you down a side aisle where the frescoes are darker, unfinished, angels without faces, oceans without shores. There's a door half hidden behind a tapestry, and when he pushes it open, the air changes. Cooler, older. You descend into the crypt. Candles flicker along the walls, throwing nervous light across sarcophagi etched with strange emblems. One lid bears the familiar spiral, but this time it's broken at the outermost ring, as if someone had tried to escape from inside. The monk gestures toward it. "Sir Ector of Tours," he whispers. Your breath catches, "So he lived." The monk shakes his head. In a manner of speaking, his body was found washed ashore on the western coast, years after his fleet disappeared. The church buried him here for his former service, though they never translated the symbols carved upon his sword. You glance at the stone cross above the tomb. Embedded within it, almost invisible, is a faint blue shimmer, like trapped seawater beneath quartz. "Sometimes," the monk continues, "on the feast of St. Michael the tomb hums. The sound rises through the floor into the choir stalls above. The brothers call it a miracle. You can't resist, and what do you call it?" He gives the ghost of a smile, a reminder. You leave the cathedral later, dazed by the sunlight, carrying more questions than answers. But something lingers, a pull, like a compass needle twitching toward a direction you can't see. You follow it through the winding medieval streets until it brings you to the old port. There, among the warehouses, stands a tiny chapel with its door half open. You duck inside. The air is thick with the smell of salt and beeswax. A woman is kneeling before a wooden icon of the Virgin, though her features are unlike any you've seen in European art. She wears a crown of coral branches, and tiny fish are carved swimming around her robes. At her feet is a Latin inscription, Regina Submarina Ora Pro Nobis. "Queen beneath the sea, pray for us." You can't help but laugh under your breath. They really couldn't let Atlantis go, could they? But the joke dies quickly, because behind the altar, half hidden by candlelight, is a mosaic that takes your breath away. It shows a city of white towers descending into deep blue water, ringed by 7 glowing halos. Above it, the sun is shown twice, once rising, once sinking. Between them, a single hand reaches from the depths, holding a crown shaped exactly like the spiral symbol. The colors shimmer as though wet. You touch the wall, the tesserae are cool beneath your palm, and then you feel it, a faint vibration. The sea is humming again. A voice interrupts, you hear it too. You turn. The woman from the altar is standing now, her face illuminated by candlelight. Her hair is streaked with silver, and her eyes hold that same patient glow you saw in the night, as though time has been circling her for centuries. She introduces herself as Isolde, keeper of the chapel of the Western Queen. Her family, she says, has tended this place since before Lisbon had walls. She walks with you to the back of the chapel where a narrow staircase leads down to the shore. Waves lap against stone steps slick with moss. The tide's low, and through the ripples you glimpse something impossible, fragments of carved marble just beneath the surface. Columns, pedestals. Isolde kneels, dipping her hand into the water. Every year, she says, the sea gives back a little more, not out of guilt, out of memory. You ask if she believes Atlantis was real. Real, she echoes. Oh, it was real enough, but not where you think. The city was not beneath the sea, it was the sea. It dreamed itself into stone, forgot, and then dissolved again. And we, foolish as ever, keep trying to build it back on land. That's joke number 1 for this section. You mutter. So basically, we're all just renovating someone else's dream. She laughs quietly. Exactly. She gives you a small bronze token before you leave. A replica, she says, of one found in a shipwreck long ago. On one side, the spiral, on the other, a motto. You hold it up to the light and read the inscription aloud. Audi Maris Tacitum, listen to the silent sea. You pocket it. Somehow, it feels heavier than metal should. That night you can't sleep. The wind outside you're in sounds like whispering waves. You roll the token between your fingers until it warms, and then you hear it again. That deep, harmonic hum, not through the walls but inside you. And with it images, flickers of memory that aren't yours, towers of pearl, lamps burning under glass domes, a library filled with scrolls written in spirals instead of lines. You wake before dawn, drenched in salt water though you haven't left your bed. The token is gone. You leave Lisbon at sunrise, traveling north toward the monasteries of Tamar, where rumor says the last surviving records of the sunken crown were hidden after the Crusades. As the road climbs into the hills, you notice strange carvings in the roadside chapels, fish with wings, lions with fins, angels blowing conch shells instead of trumpets. History, it seems, has been whispering all along, just not in any language the sober historians could accept. When you finally reach Tamar, the monastery stands silent, its round church built like a fortress. Inside, frescoes blaze with gold, knights riding through seas of azure, carrying banners with spiral suns. One figure stands at the center, a knight holding a coral crown, his face turned toward the west. Beneath him is an inscription, Memoria sub unda, memory beneath the wave. You realize then that this is no longer just a story about a lost city. It's a story about persistence, about how belief refuses to drown. The sea may bury marble and gold, but not meaning. Meaning floats. And as the wind sighs through the high arches, the echo of the bells returns, soft this time like a pulse. You think you can hear words in it, rising through centuries of silt and silence. Find us. Remember. You step closer to the mural, tracing the coral crown. The paint feels warm beneath your touch. Somewhere outside, thunder rolls, not from the sky but from the coast. It seems the sea has not finished speaking. Section 6. The thunder you heard wasn't weather. It was memory surfacing. You wake in the guest quarters of the Tamar monastery to the sound of stone shifting, a slow grinding echo that seems to come from within the walls themselves. The candle has burned to a nub. The chamber smells faintly of lime dust and salt. You glance around, the token is still gone, but etched faintly into the condensation on your window is that spiral pattern again, drawn by some unseen fingertip during the night. 7 rings, always 7. You dress quickly and step into the courtyard, where dawn is just brushing the battlements with color. The monks are already awake, their chants rising in waves from the chapel, low, steady, rhythmic. It's beautiful and unsettling, because under their Latin voices, you could swear there's another resonance, a deep harmonic that vibrates through your bones. You follow the sound through cloisters smelling of wax and damp stone. In the corner of one corridor stands an old monk repairing a fresco. He turns, noticing your curiosity, and smiles faintly. The walls remember, he says. You chuckle softly. I've been getting that impression. He motions you closer, pointing with his brush to a section of the fresco. Look here, he says. Do you see the angels? You nod, winged figures in red and gold, but their halos look oddly like sunbursts viewed underwater. He lowers his voice. Those were copied from an older chapel, one that stood by the sea before the Templars came here. The brothers who painted this said the designs came to them in dreams, dreams of light seen through water. There it is again, the fusion of sacred and submerged. You lean closer, noticing something the others must have missed. Within the angels' robes, tiny fish shapes are hidden, barely visible under layers of varnish. You think they knew, you ask. He shrugs, maybe not consciously, but faith often paints what reason forgets. That's your first wry grin of the morning. So the church was basically Pinterest for lost civilizations. The monk doesn't laugh, but his eyes twinkle like he wants to. You leave him to his fresco and climb the spiral staircase toward the belfry. Halfway up, you pause. The inner walls of the tower are covered in graffiti, not crude scratches from tourists, but deliberate symbols. Spirals, suns, wavy lines, and one phrase repeated over and over. Sub aqua lux manet. Light remains beneath the water. The phrase feels oddly comforting. You whisper it to yourself, and the acoustics of the tower throw it back at you, but stretched deeper, almost like the voice of the sea repeating the words from far below. When you reach the top, the entire valley spreads before you. Olive trees shimmer silver in the wind. The Tagus River winds eastward like a vein of glass. It's a calm scene, perfectly ordinary, except that as you lean on the parapet, you see a pattern in the distant fields. 7 concentric circles of stone mounds, each barely visible, arranged as if echoing the spiral of Atlantis itself. No one mentions them in the monastery's archives, but someone arranged those mounds deliberately, long before modern plows cut through these hills. Historians still argue whether such field circles were medieval irrigation systems or something older. Some even call them Atlantean echoes. Most scholars roll their eyes at that idea, but here, gazing at those perfect rings from a Templar tower, it doesn't seem far-fetched. Later that day, you find yourself in the main nave, listening to a young novice rehearse an organ piece. The music swells and something remarkable happens. As the low notes rumble, the air in the nave vibrates, not in a metaphorical way, but physically. Dust motes form patterns, swirling into rings like miniature whirlpools. You can't help murmuring, "Okay, that's slightly aquatic." The novice looks startled. You saw it too. You nod. He closes the organ with trembling hands. The old master says it happens when we play certain harmonics. He says the stones were cut to sing back the sound of the sea. It's an absurd claim, and yet your skin prickles. Medieval cathedrals were acoustic marvels. Some were tuned like instruments themselves. If this one was built atop ruins older than Christianity, then perhaps those frequencies weren't accidental. Perhaps they were inherited. After the rehearsal, you wander into the cloister garden. At its center stands a fountain shaped like a chalice, but instead of saints or vines, its carvings depict waves and curling fish tails. A few monks are pruning herbs nearby, and you join one of them, Brother Tomas, a cheerful man who claims he once studied astronomy before taking vows. You ever wonder why your fountain looks like Poseidon's bathtub? You joke. He grins. Oh, that's not Poseidon, it's Saint Clement, patron of sailors, though between us the iconography wanders. Wanders. He wipes his hands and gestures to the rim of the fountain. Look closely. You do, and notice the carvings form not random waves but letters, looping and fluid. It's not Latin, though. It's something else, older and phonetic. We think it's from a lost coastal script, Tomas says. Every few decades someone claims to have translated it, and every few decades they vanish into archives chasing more proof. I gave up trying to decode it myself. Why? He chuckles. Because every translation ends the same way. The sea will come for what it remembers. You can't help but murmur, cheerful. He laughs. Faith without mystery is just architecture. That evening, as you sit by the riverbank outside the monastery walls, you hear thunder again. But this time it's not a storm. It's coming from beneath the water like distant drumming. The river surface trembles, and for an instant you glimpse light poolsing below, a soft bluish glow that moves like breath. A pair of fishermen nearby shout and cross themselves. One of them mutters about the Mari's Vox, the voice of the river. He says it happens once every generation, when the tides align with the stars. They say it's Atlantis calling her children home, he tells you. You raise an eyebrow, and do her children ever call back? He smiles, toothless and patient. Always, we build, we fall, we build again. That's joke number, humanity. Basically that one kid who keeps rebuilding his Lego Atlantis every night. He chuckles. Aye, and the sea's the parent who keeps stepping on it. Night falls. The monastery glows like a lantern on the hillside. Inside, the organ plays again, and you realize the harmony now matches the rhythm of the river below. You remember Isolde's words. It dreamed itself into stone, forgot, and then dissolved again. You can almost believe the cathedral isn't a monument at all, but an instrument, built to keep the song of Atlantis alive. A sudden gust rattles the windows, and for a moment you see your reflection in the glass overlaid with the river's reflection below. Two worlds superimposed, both rippling. You whisper half in awe, half in resignation. Okay, I get it, the sea wins. The thunder fades, leaving behind a hush so profound you can hear your heartbeat. And in that silence, you feel a truth rise like a bubble from the deep. That maybe Atlantis isn't a place waiting to be rediscovered. Maybe it's a frequency waiting to be remembered. You fall asleep to the sound of distant chanting, the monks' voices blending with the faint hum of water against stone. Somewhere in the half-dream between waking and sleep, you hear the words again, soft, certain, familiar. Sub aqua lux manet. Light remains beneath the water. And somehow you believe it. You wake to the smell of rain, not the gray drizzle kind that dampens moods, but the wild, sudden kind that makes the air electric with promise. The monastery bells toll faintly in the distance, muffled by the storm. You roll over in your narrow cot and catch a glimpse of the horizon through the small window, clouds curling like ink in water, the sky painted in pewter and pearl. There's a knock at your door. When you open it, a messenger stands there, soaked but grinning, holding a sealed parchment wrapped in oilskin. For you, he says, from the coast. The seal bears a crest you recognize instantly, a coral crown flanked by two seahorses. Isolde. You break the seal, and her handwriting floods the page, graceful, looping, confident. If you want to understand the song you've been hearing, come to Coruña. The Queen of Blue Fire is waiting. No further explanation, no signature, just that same spiral symbol drawn beneath her name. 2 days later, you're standing on the northern coast of Iberia, where the Atlantic hits the cliffs like an impatient god. The rain has passed, leaving the air bright and sharp. Below the promontory lies the old harbor, a tangle of masts, gulls, and rumors. You find the Queen of Blue Fire, not in a palace, but in a weathered stone manor overlooking the sea. She's a widow, technically, though people whisper the title Queen half in jest, half in awe. Her name is Queen Aldara of Galicia, and if the world had been even slightly more romantic, she'd have been remembered alongside Eleanor of Aquitaine and Isabella of Castile. Instead, history forgot her, which of course is why you're here. You're ushered into a hall lined with maps. Some are the usual medieval absurdities, sea monsters, upside-down continents, angels blowing winds, but others are shockingly precise. Lines of longitude, coastal outlines almost modern. One in particular shows a chain of islands west of the Azores, drawn in faded gold leaf. The title reads, Insulae Ignes Cerulae, Islands of Blue Fire. And at their center, 7 rings. Aldara enters without fanfare. She's older than you expected, perhaps 50, but her presence fills the room like a tide. She wears no crown, just a necklace of lapis beads and coral fragments. When she speaks, her voice carries the calm authority of someone who's ruled storms before. "You've heard it too," she says simply. You nod the hum. She smiles. Good, most people only hear silence. She gestures to the map. My ancestors claimed descent from sailors who survived the last night of Atlantis. It's nonsense, of course, but useful nonsense. It gave them courage to sail where others feared. You ask her why she calls these islands the Blue Fire. She walks to the window, gazing at the ocean. Because sometimes when the sea is calm and the moon full, the water burns with light. Whole patches of it glowing blue like veins of flame. Fishermen used to call it a blessing. My great-grandfather called it a door. You follow her down to the shore that evening. The tide is low, the sky molten with sunset. A small ship waits at anchor, its prow shaped like a sea serpent. Aldara's servants are loading crates, maps, instruments, something wrapped in velvet. You're going somewhere, you say. Not far, she replies, though her tone makes that sound like a lie. There are things beneath these waters that shouldn't glow, and yet they do. I intend to see what calls to them. Historians still argue whether medieval queens ever sponsored exploratory voyages independently, without papal or royal sanction. The official record says no. But then again, official records also say Atlantis never existed. Aldara gestures for you to join her. You've already heard the song. You might as well see the singer. You laugh nervously. That's the sort of line people say right before vanishing in the chronicles. That's fine, she says. Some stories are meant to be rediscovered, not remembered. By nightfall, you're aboard her ship, the San Isidro, crewed by a dozen sailors who look equal parts superstitious and devoted. The wind carries the scent of salt and citrus. Lanterns flicker like low stars. Aldara stands at the bow, her hair loose, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The alchemists call it aqua ardens, she murmurs, water that burns without consuming. You peer over the rail. The sea glows faintly below, not phosphorescence but something deeper, more deliberate. It's as if the ocean floor itself were breathing light. The sailors whisper prayers. One crosses himself. Another mutters about the return of the crown. That's your cue for joke number 1. So, worst case scenario, we get a good light show and possibly divine retribution. Aldara smirks. Exactly. Either way, history will envy us. Around midnight, the glow intensifies. The sea turns glassy, unnaturally still. Aldara raises her hand, signaling silence. The crew obeys instantly. You can feel it again. The hum, the same note that reverberated through cathedral walls and monastery stones, now rising straight through the hull. You whisper, it's like the sea's tuning itself. She nods, or tuning us. The glow becomes blinding. You shield your eyes, and in the glare you glimpse something beneath the surface. Vast structures, pale and geometric, columns, roads, a spire shaped like a seashell. It's there only for an instant, but it's real. When the light fades, the ocean returns to its ordinary, indifferent blackness. No one speaks for a long time. Finally, Aldara breaks the silence. Now you've seen it too. You exhale, trembling, so it's true. She smiles sadly. Truth is never the problem, belief is. Morning comes quietly. The San Isidro drifts near the harbor again, though the sailors swear they never turned her around. Aldara is writing in her logbook when you approach. What will you tell them, you ask? That we saw light, she says. That we heard singing, that it could be explained. You raise an eyebrow, and do you believe that? She closes the book gently. I believe that faith and curiosity are sisters. They fight, but they share the same blood. You can't help a dry laugh. Historians will love you. She grins. Historians never love anyone who still dreams. That night back in your rented room overlooking the sea, you find a small object on your windowsill. A coin, identical to Isolde's token, etched with the spiral on one side and the words Sub Mare Cor Regnat on the other. The heart reigns beneath the sea. You turn it over in your palm, watching the moonlight glint along its edges. It feels warm, pulsing faintly, as though it remembers the hum even now. You realize that every person you've met, the monk, the alchemist, the queen, has been carrying a fragment of the same melody. Different instruments, same song. The forgotten empire hasn't vanished. It's simply been humming through history, waiting for someone curious or foolish enough to listen. You hold the coin up to your ear and swear you can hear the sea whispering through it. We are not lost. You are late. And somewhere out there, under the waves, the light stirs again. The journey continues inland. The Queen's ship fades into legend almost overnight, officially lost at sea, though you and the sailors know she made it back. The chronicles will one day call it a failed expedition to uncharted waters, a tidy summary for something that cracked open reality itself. You leave Galicia with a new destination whispered by the wind, Prague. The rumors there are wilder than ever, alchemists who claim the philosopher's stone was forged not in furnaces, but in salt water. You travel by caravan, through vineyards and river valleys, watching Europe's heartland unroll like an ancient tapestry. By the time you reach Prague, autumn has set in. The city rises from mist like a dream with edges, Gothic spires, crooked bridges, towers with clock faces that never agree on the hour. Alchemy hums through its cobbled veins. Every second doorway seems to hide an experiment or an argument with God. You're led by invitation and accident into the workshop of Master Theophilus, a name spoken with equal parts reverence and irritation in the taverns. He greets you with a grin that's more mad than welcoming. You're the one who's been chasing ghosts under the sea, he says, eyes bright. Perfect. You'll appreciate this. The laboratory is chaos. Brass alembics, half-melted crucibles, manuscripts scrawled with diagrams that look more like coral growth than chemistry. On one table sits a bowl of seawater glowing faintly blue beneath candlelight. Theophilus notices your stare. Yes, he says, that glow is real, collected from the western tide just before it vanished. He dips a glass rod into the liquid, and it shivers, literally hums, producing a low note that resonates through the room. It sings, you murmur. He laughs, delighted. Ah, you hear it too. Good, my apprentices only hear bubbles, but that frequency, my friend, is older than iron, older than prayer. You ask what he's trying to do. Recreate, he says. Not gold from lead. That's child's play. I want to recreate the breath of Atlantis, the alchemical equilibrium. You see, they didn't turn metal into perfection. They turned themselves into resonance. You can't resist, so you're less a scientist and more a self-tuning fork. That earns you joke number one and a barking laugh from the alchemist. Exactly. At least someone gets it. He leads you into a deeper chamber, where manuscripts from Alexandria and Toledo are piled in fragile towers. One, opened reverently on a stand, bears an unfamiliar seal, a spiral encircling a flame. This, he says, is from the Codex Maris, found in a chest that washed ashore near Cadiz centuries after Plato. The text is written in alternating red and blue ink, each line undulating like waves. Theophilus runs a finger under one passage. Here, he says, is the recipe they hid from us, not for transmutation but illumination. Dissolve the stone in the mother sea, and it will remember the sun. You frown. The sea will remember the sun. He nods. Memory, not matter, is the key. The philosopher's stone wasn't forged, it was awakened, from salt, from longing, from the resonance between loss and light. Historians still argue whether any alchemist of the 14th century ever came close to genuine chemistry, or whether they were simply poets disguised as scientists. Listening to Theophilus, you're certain it was both. The experiment begins at dusk. He pours the luminous seawater into a wide crucible, adds crushed lapis, powdered gold, and something that smells suspiciously like burnt honey. Then he begins to hum, a deep, vibrating tone that echoes the very sound you heard beneath the sea. The instruments tremble. The water glows brighter. For a moment you see shapes in the light, rings, towers, a city breathing underwater. Then the glow collapses with a soft sigh. Theophilus opens his eyes, disappointed. "Too much human," he mutters, "not enough ocean." You can't help a half smile. Story of our species. He chuckles wearily. Atlantis had it right. They built cities that listened instead of shouting. You spend several nights in his workshop, recording everything, trying to decode the humming pattern. At one point, you ask why he's so certain Atlantis was real. He sets down his quill and looks at you seriously. Because every civilization invents its own Atlantis. Egypt called it Zep-Tepi. The Persians called it Var. Even the Hebrews had Eden. We always tell the same story. There was once harmony, then pride, then loss. But maybe, he leans closer, maybe the loss never ended. Maybe we're still falling. That's your second joke. You should definitely not be in charge of party entertainment. He laughs, wiping his hands. Oh, but imagine the light show. One evening, Theophilus invites you to the Charles Bridge. It's past midnight, mist curling along the river. He carries a lantern filled with the luminous water. When he uncaps it, the glow spills across the cobblestones, casting the statues in eerie blue halos. Alchemy, he says softly, isn't about power, it's about memory. Every element remembers its first form, even we do. He dips a coin into the light, a spiral coin, identical to the ones you received from Isolde and the Queen. They've been appearing all over Europe, he murmurs. Washed up, traded, hidden in churches, the mark of a brotherhood that predates Rome. You stare at the glowing coin. So they really existed, the Knights of the Sunken Crown. He smiles. Exist. My friend, they still recruit. Some through monasteries, some through laboratories. They believe Atlantis will return not by surfacing, but by reawakening, through anyone who remembers its frequency. The lantern flickers as a cold wind sweeps the bridge. For an instant, you think you see movement beneath the Vltava's dark water, light poolsing below, answering the glow above. Atlantis dreams through us, Theophilus whispers. Every thought, every invention, every song that refuses to die, it's the empire breathing through the cracks. You can't help murmuring. So basically, the Renaissance is just Atlantis doing a comeback tour. That's joke number 3, and it earns a quiet laugh before he closes the lantern. A week later, you leave Prague. Theophilus is gone, vanished, his lab emptied, his manuscripts missing. The only thing left on your writing desk is the glowing coin, still faintly warm. You hold it up to the morning light, watching it shimmer. You can almost hear the hum again, distant and comforting. Everywhere you go, cathedrals, monasteries, castles, you notice patterns now. Spiral windows, shell motifs, stone fish hidden among gargoyles. It's as though the world itself has been humming all along and you're finally attuned to its key. Atlantis isn't sleeping, it's scattered, fragmented, remembered in pieces of architecture, in forgotten experiments, in the dreams of queens and alchemists alike. And as the road winds onward, you realize the truth Theophilus hinted at. Perhaps the philosopher's stone was never a mineral at all. Maybe it was sound. The same sound that hums beneath the sea. The same note that ties faith, science, and memory into one endless, luminous chord. The hum grows fainter as you walk, but it's still there, waiting. You travel north again, through forests where mist lingers like thought. The road is quieter now. No queens, no scholars, no maps with dragons. Just you, the spiral coin in your pocket, and the hum that sometimes stirs in your bones when the night goes very still. The next whisper comes from the coast of Brittany, a monastery perched on a cliff called St. Malo's Edge. The locals call it the last lighthouse of the drowned gods. Fishermen say its monks guard the gate of the western tide, a phrase that smells of myth and salt. Naturally, you go there immediately. When you arrive, the sea is angry. Waves slam against basalt pillars like fists, and gulls spiral in the wind like scraps of parchment. The monastery itself looks as if it was carved by the tide, walls streaked with white salt, gargoyles half eroded into leering faces. The monks welcome you with hesitant smiles. Their silent order, the Custodes Maris, keepers of the sea. But one, the prior, an elderly man with eyes like cracked glass, breaks his vow just for you. "We have been expecting you," he whispers. "The coin you carry hums in our prayers." He leads you through stone corridors lit only by blue oil lamps. The light feels oceanic, as though the building itself breathes underwater. In the scriptorium, the monks are copying a text you recognize immediately, the Codex Maris. Only these pages are older, darker, edges crisped by fire. You ask where they got it. "It was gifted," the prior replies, "by a traveler who said the sea told him to." That earns the first light joke. I really need to start listening to my seashells more carefully. The prior smiles faintly but doesn't comment. He shows you to a chamber overlooking the cliffs, where a great bronze bell hangs above a narrow slit window. Its surface is carved with spirals and waves. "When the tide rises highest," he says, "the bell hums, not rings, hums. We call it the breath of Atlantis." That night, unable to sleep, you sit beside the bell. The ocean beyond glows faintly, phosphorescent tides shimmering like liquid stars. The hum begins so softly you almost think it's your imagination. A low resonance, the same tone Theophilus' seawater sang, the same vibration you felt in the Queen's cabin. The bronze trembles under your palm. When the tide reaches the cliff's edge, you hear something beneath the hum, a voice. Not words exactly, more like a memory trying to speak. Images bloom behind your eyelids, stone colonnades under glassy waves, mirrors catching sunlight from beneath, figures walking through gardens of coral. The sensation is both immense and unbearably lonely. And then it's gone, the hum fades, the tide falls. You're left trembling, unsure whether you've dreamed or communed. Historians still argue whether St. Malo's monastery ever existed at all. It appears in only 2 records, both describing a house that sang to the sea. Some think it was destroyed by storm, others that it was deliberately erased, its relics too strange for Christian Europe. Whatever the truth, you know what you felt, that same impossible frequency, echoing through everything from alchemy to architecture. In the morning, the prior finds you still by the bell. "You heard it," he says simply. "Few do, fewer survive it." You smile faintly. You probably should have mentioned that part earlier. Second joke landed. He doesn't return it. The sound remembers you now. Wherever you go, it will find you again. He presses a small scroll into your hand. "This was found sealed in the bell's mouth. We do not read what the sea writes." Inside the scroll, in faded blue ink, is a single phrase. "When the dream drowns, the builders wake." You read it aloud, and something deep within you hums in reply. Later that week, a merchant offers to take you south toward Lisbon. You accept, the lure of the western sea too strong to ignore. The road winds through Breton villages that still whisper about the lights under the waves. Children draw spirals on their doors for protection. In one tavern, a sailor claims his grandfather saw a marble spire rise from the ocean during an eclipse. You buy him a drink, half for information, half for entertainment. He leans in close, eyes wide. It wasn't a storm, it was breathing. The water was alive. You grin. "I mean, technically, all water is alive if you add enough sailors." Third joke, and the tavern erupts in laughter. but that laughter doesn't erase the chill down your spine. Lisbon greets you with warmth and wind. Ships from every known corner of the world crowd its harbor, galleons, caravels, fishing boats heavy with cod and rumor. The age of discovery is boiling here. Every tavern reeks of salt, tar, and ambition. You find lodging above a mapmaker's workshop. The owner, a stout woman named Dona Esperanza, spends her nights charting imaginary coasts based on sailors' dreams. She shows you one, blushing slightly. "Look," she says, "an island shaped like a spiral. A captain swore he saw it west of Madeira." You trace the spiral with your finger. It matches the design on your coin. Esperanza nods. "The church says it's superstition, but when I draw that symbol, the compass behaves strangely. North loses patience." You stay awake that night, listening to waves slap against stone. Somewhere beyond them, beyond the horizon everyone else accepts, you sense something vast shifting in its sleep. Historians still argue whether early explorers genuinely sought Atlantis or simply used it as an excuse for funding. But for the sailors of Lisbon, it's not a metaphor, it's a navigational goal. To them, Atlantis isn't lost, it's waiting. At dawn, the harbor bursts into gold. You stand among crates and ropes, watching a young navigator adjust his compass. He looks barely 20, face sunburned and eager. "They say the sea west of the Azores glows at night," he tells you. "If that's true, we'll find the gate." The gate. He grins. The same the monks talk about, the one between the world that sank and the one that rose. My captain calls it the luminous current. You remember the scroll in your pocket. When the dream drowns, the builders wake. The hum returns, subtle but insistent, vibrating beneath the gull's cries. You look toward the horizon, where the water meets the sky like two mirrors pressed together. For a heartbeat, you think you see light pulsing beneath the waves, slow, deliberate, as though a heartbeat answering your own. And you understand what Theophilus meant, what the queen dreamed, what the monks guarded. Atlantis isn't a place you find. It's a rhythm you remember. You close your eyes and whisper, "I hear you." The tide surges, foam hissing around your boots. A single coin washes ashore, spiraled, gleaming faintly gold in the morning sun. You pick it up, it hums. The sailors shout to board, and you realize you're out of land to chase. Next stop, the edge of the map. The sea is restless tonight. It slaps the hull like a drummer testing rhythm, teasing you toward the horizon where maps stop and memory begins. You're aboard the Santa Ania Cutes, a three-masted caravel crewed by men too young to know fear and too desperate to pretend otherwise. The sails snap and sigh. Lanterns sway. Every line creaks like old bone. You lean over the rail, breathing the brine and the quiet promise of discovery. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the known world, Atlantis is said to dream. The captain, Mateo de Vieira, joins you at the bow. His beard is streaked with salt and superstition. "We follow the luminous current," he says, voice low. "The compasses go wild, but the stars stay true." You glance at his chart, a chaos of circles and arrows, one bold spiral drawn dead center. "Looks more like a doodle than a map," you quip. He chuckles, "Maybe, but doodles sometimes lead to destiny." That's your first joke for the section. Mateo doesn't laugh long. Sailors rarely do when they've got too much ocean under their feet. Days blur into waves. The crew's chatter fades with the coastline. The Santa Ania Cutes becomes a floating monastery of motion and salt. Every morning the sun rises from a pink sea. Every night it sinks into fire. One evening the navigator shouts, a glow in the west. You rush to the deck. It's faint, but there. The sea is shining. Not moonlight, not bioluminescent plankton. Something deeper. A steady, pulsing light, as if the water itself remembers how to breathe. The sailors mutter prayers. Mateo crosses himself. You, of course, mutter, "Guess we found the underwater disco." That's joke too, and it breaks the tension just enough. The glow expands as they sail closer. spiraling out from a dark center like the rings of a massive fingerprint. The sea hums softly, and the coin in your pocket vibrates in rhythm. For 3 days the light grows stronger. The compasses spin madly. The ship's wooden hull creaks as though listening. Then calm. The air thickens, the waves flatten, and the ocean's surface turns mirror smooth. "Dead water," Mateo whispers. "The sailors of the Azores fear this. Ships drift here for weeks without wind." You test the surface with a rope bucket. It comes up shimmering faintly. "It's not dead," you say. "It's awake." That earns you one wary look and one whispered prayer. By dusk, the stars vanish, swallowed by a faint glow that seems to rise from below. The water is pale gold, the horizon erased. The Santa Iniacutes floats in light. Historians still argue whether explorers in the late 15th century ever reported glowing seas, or if such records were inventions of later mystics. Some scholars link the phenomenon to natural bioluminescence. Others whisper of lost magnetism, a resonant belt like the aurora beneath the waves. But no one, not even the skeptics, denies the sailors' collective terror. That night you dream of towers, not sinking, rising. Coral spires twisting toward the surface, their tips breaking the waves, their roots glowing with gold. You hear music like the hum of Theophilus's crucible, the ringing of St. Malo's bell, and the deep heartbeat of the sea itself, all merging into one sound that feels like remembering your own name after 1,000 years. When you wake, the air is filled with the same tone. The ship is motionless. The crew kneels on deck whispering prayers. Mateo points off the bow. At first, you think it's dawn. Then you realize the light isn't from the sky, it's from below. A great circle of stone glimmers through the golden water. Columns, streets, walls, a city. "Atlantis," Mateo breathes. The sailors cheer, weep, cross themselves, argue. You stand silent, heart hammering in your throat. It's too vast, too symmetrical, too alive to be an illusion. The coin in your pocket grows warm. The hum deepens. You drop a sounding line. It stops after barely 20 fathoms. That's shallow enough to dive. But as you prepare, the sea brightens again and the water thickens, almost syrup-like. When you touch it, it hums back, a vibration in your bones. You take a breath, tie the coin around your wrist, and slip into the water. At once the hum envelops you. The light is everywhere, soft, gold blue, almost tender. Below, streets stretch in geometric perfection. Arches rise like petrified music. Murals flicker faintly on stone walls, scenes of people working, singing, building. And then you see them. Figures, not quite human, not quite gone. Silhouettes of light moving through the city as if centuries never passed. They turn toward you, not hostile, just curious, their faces shimmering with unreadable calm. One reaches out. The moment its light touches your chest, you hear a whisper, not with ears but in thought, "You remember us." You nod, unable to speak underwater, but the thought echoes back. Memory builds what time erases. Historians still debate whether the idea of Atlantis as a memory civilization began with Plato or with Renaissance mystics who reinterpreted it as metaphor. But here, now, metaphor and matter blur like sand and surf. The figure gestures to the city, and suddenly you see what it once was: plazas, gardens, fountains glowing with inner light, people laughing, children running through shimmering archways. A civilization of balance. Then a flash, fire trembling, the sea roaring above, towers collapsing. You feel their grief like a wave breaking through your mind. The light fades, the figure lowers its hand. "Why show me this?" you think. The answer hums back, "Because you still listen." Then everything dissolves. The city shatters into ripples of gold, and you're pulled upward, gasping as you break the surface. The Santa Iniacutes is gone. Only the coin remains, floating beside you, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. You drift for hours, days, time ceases meaning. The sea carries you toward dawn. Eventually, a passing fishing vessel hauls you aboard. The sailors speak Portuguese, and you can only stammer your thanks, clutching the coin tight. One of them, an old man with skin like driftwood, peers at it. "Ah," he says, "the mark of the deep kings. I've seen that before. Came up in a net once. Glowed for 3 nights, then turned cold." You ask where he found it. "Off the Azores," he replies. "The sea there hums when it's lonely." That line makes your third light joke easy. Guess I know a few people like that too. He laughs, shaking his head. "Be careful what songs you answer, traveler. Some never end." Back on land weeks later, you sit by the shore, staring west. The sea looks ordinary now, just foam and horizon. Yet sometimes when the wind drops, you feel that faint hum return, soft, steady, eternal. You realize Atlantis didn't vanish beneath the waves. It folded itself into the world's memory. Every whisper of discovery, every song of longing, every light that refuses to go out, it's Atlantis remembering itself through us. And you perhaps were never searching for it. You were returning. You never really leave the ocean. You move inland, yes, but the sound follows. It hums beneath cathedral floors, within market fountains, under your own ribs. It's the same tone that filled the Queen's chamber, echoed in Theophilus's crucible, and rang from the bronze bell at St. Malo's edge. You've started to hum back, sometimes unconsciously, and strangers glance at you the way one glances at someone quietly haunted. You arrive in Florence, heart of the Renaissance, where marble breathes and the air tastes of paint, dust, and genius. Every workshop smells like turpentine and fevered ambition. And everywhere, hidden between brushstrokes and blueprints, you see it. Spirals, waves, the geometry of Atlantis smuggled into art. You wander into a studio by the Arno, where a young man sketches flying machines with the calm certainty of someone who's already seen them work. He introduces himself as Leonardo, his hands stained with ink and his hair in open rebellion against gravity. "You study the sea?" he asks, eyes gleaming. "Something like that," you answer. "Good," he smiles, "because I dream of its bones." He shows you a notebook, pages crammed with sketches of shells, waves, whirlpools, and a design labeled Il Respiro del Mare, the breath of the sea. You can't help it. You and I might have the same pen pal. That's joke number 1, and he grins as though he knows exactly what you mean. He explains that water is the most intelligent element. It remembers form, it seeks balance, it obeys but never surrenders. You tell him of your voyage, of the glowing sea and the submerged city. He listens silently, hands folded, then says softly, "Atlantis may not be lost. It may be the world's dream of itself, its attempt to remember harmony through us." He draws a spiral on the table, fingertip trailing sawdust. Everything returns to this pattern: blood flow, galaxies, seashells, even thought. Perhaps the spiral is how the universe breathes. Historians still argue whether Leonardo truly believed in Atlantis or used it as metaphor for natural law. His notebooks contain both mechanical precision and near-mystical reverie, evidence of a mind that refused to choose between science and wonder. In his workshop, you meet other thinkers, painters, mathematicians, astrologers. They debate whether Atlantis sank in pride or in mercy. One claims it was destroyed for challenging heaven. Another insists it ascended, leaving only its echo. You just sip wine and remark, "Well, at least it avoided property taxes." That's your second joke, and it earns a few tired laughs from men who haven't left their easels in days. But then, amid the banter, a woman enters. Isabetta, a sculptor known for carving saints who look half in prayer, half in rebellion. She listens to your tale and asks, "If Atlantis still hums, who is it humming for?" The room falls silent. You don't answer, you can't. Later that evening, you find her by the river, sketching ripples in her notebook. "Every reflection," she says, "is just a memory of light. Maybe that's what your sea was doing, remembering." She dips her hand into the water, pulling up droplets that sparkle gold in the moonlight. "Do you hear it?" she asks. You do, barely. The hum again, buried beneath the current. Florence, she whispers, is just Atlantis built on dry land, same hunger, same beauty, same pride. Only the tide hasn't claimed it yet. That hits like prophecy, though you hide it with your third joke. So, should we start swimming practice early? She laughs, but it's a soft laugh, the kind people use when they've already accepted the ending. Weeks pass. You become part of the city's rhythm, painting, sketching, humming without noticing. You begin to see patterns connecting everything, the curvature of a dome echoing a shell, the swirl of fresco clouds mirroring eddies in the sea. Even music follows the spiral, the lute's vibrations forming golden ratios that whisper of lost geometry. One evening, Leonardo invites you to his study to show you a model, a perfect sphere encased in concentric rings. This, he says, is how the ancients thought the world sang. Each planet hums in pitch, harmony of the spheres. Atlantis, perhaps, found the right chord. He turns the ring slowly, and the air vibrates faintly, like the sound of a distant bell underwater. You've heard it before, he says, watching you. You nod everywhere. He smiles faintly, then maybe it chose you to remember it. Historians still debate whether the Renaissance's explosion of knowledge was born purely from rediscovered manuscripts or from something stranger, an undercurrent of memory stirring the collective mind of Europe. The architecture, the mathematics, the music, all echo patterns found in nature and in the myth of Atlantis itself. You begin to suspect that the empire didn't fall at all. It transformed. It became inspiration. When artists painted divine light, they were painting memory. When engineers designed canals and flying machines, they were rebuilding lost waterways of thought. Atlantis wasn't gone. It was resurfacing through creativity. You catch yourself smiling at the thought. The lost empire reinvented as art school, you mutter. It fits humor and awe side by side. But the hum grows louder as months pass. You start hearing it not just in water, but in marble dust, in candlelight, even in silence. Sometimes it forms words, fragments of the same phrase that once drifted from the monastery's scroll. When the dream drowns, the builders wake. The builders, you realize, are waking again, in pigments, in plans, in stone. The Renaissance isn't a rebirth, it's a resurfacing. And maybe you're not an observer anymore. Maybe you're part of the construction crew. One night, as Florence sleeps, you walk to the Ponte Vecchio. The river glimmers below, mirroring the stars. You take out the spiral coin and toss it into the water. It hits with barely a sound, but ripples spread, perfect and golden. The hum answers faintly, grateful. You whisper, "Keep building." And for the first time in months, the sound inside you softens into quiet. Somewhere downstream, bells begin to ring for morning mass, their tones almost, but not quite, matching the hum you've carried so long. Almost. The world is still slightly out of tune, but closer, much closer. Years turn like pages gilded with dust. You drift northward, carrying with you that soft remainder of the hum, a note that never entirely fades. By the time you reach the misty coasts of England, the Renaissance has turned to rumor, and the world is busy measuring itself in trade winds and telescopes. Ships grow larger, clocks more precise, and men begin to name the unknown as though ownership were the same as understanding. The hum lies low here, hidden beneath the pulse of empire. Yet it waits, in harbors, in the shivering of ship masts, in the quiet of libraries where monks have been replaced by scholars with spectacles and ink-stained thumbs. You find lodging near Oxford, among old stones that pretend to have forgotten Rome and Byzantium. The air smells of parchment, wood smoke, and the slow confidence of progress. You enter one of the lecture halls, a vaulted room filled with candlelight and curiosity. A professor is packing, quoting Bacon, "We are but the servants and interpreters of nature." His words are a declaration of freedom, a cutting loose from myth. Yet you feel something tug beneath them, the echo of older reverence. When the lecture ends, a student with restless eyes corners you in the cloister walk. His name is Isaac, though everyone still calls him by his family name, Newton. "You spoke of harmonies in the tavern last night," he says. "Music of the spheres, was it? I've been working on similar notions. Gravity may be the same law that moves planets and pulls apples to earth, a single rhythm." You smile. Perhaps the world hums a single song then. He frowns slightly. "A metaphor. Or a memory, you say." He pauses, intrigued despite himself. "You speak as though nature is alive." You shrug, "Isn't she?" He doesn't answer, but later that evening you catch him outside under the moon, humming softly, testing sound against silence. The 17th century unfolds in clocks and star charts, in powder smoke and print. Knowledge becomes mechanical, divine order translated into laws of motion. The hum adapts. It hides in the ticking of gears, in the breath between equations, in the long pauses of thought before revelation strikes. You travel through London, now swollen with commerce and soot. The Thames, once bright, glides dull and secretive. Yet even here under the bridges the hum persists, a ghost note beneath the grind of progress. You meet an instrument maker named Henry who is building something strange, a resonant sphere meant to capture pure tone. "I want to find the original pitch," he explains, "the one that makes all matter sing." He strikes a tuning fork. The vibration trembles through your bones, and for a heartbeat you think you hear it, the same sound from the glowing sea. He notices your reaction. "You've heard it too." "Long ago," you whisper, "but not from metal." He leans forward. "Then from where?" You answer truthfully, "From the deep." Henry nods as though that's the most reasonable thing in the world. "Then the deep and the heavens are kin," he says. "Both call to us through resonance." You laugh. "Be careful, or the Royal Society will accuse you of poetry." "That," he says, "would be my first accomplishment worth defending." Centuries shift. Empires rise, cities burn, revolutions redraw maps. And still, the hum keeps slipping through history's cracks, hidden in the pitch of violin strings, in the vibration of steam engines, in the silent rhythm of telegraph wires. Sometimes you stop and wonder if the hum is growing fainter, or if the world's noise is simply drowning it out. In Paris, you stand before an early phonograph, a brass and wax contraption designed to trap voices. The inventor boasts that now even sound itself can be imprisoned, replayed, owned. He turns a crank, the wax cylinder spins, a voice emerges, distorted but alive. It's a woman's voice, reading from an old French translation of Timaeus, Plato's dialogue on the creation of the world. You hear the words, and under them, faint as breath, the hum. It bleeds through the recording, an artifact no one else notices. But to you it's unmistakable, Atlantis, still whispering through machines. You begin to write again, not for publication but to remember. You fill notebooks with sketches of spirals, waveforms, constellations. You start calling the hum by a new name, the remembering frequency. It seems to rise whenever humanity nears discovery, when the mind is stretched thin enough to glimpse pattern behind pattern. Painters, inventors, mathematicians, all of them are tuning forks struck by the same unseen hand. And maybe, just maybe, you've been walking through time as one of those instruments yourself. Late in the century, you meet an old friend, or his descendant perhaps, in a seaside town called Whitby. The cliffs there are carved by wind and fossil, and the water below glows faintly at night. You sit together watching the phosphorescence ripple. He asks, "Do you ever think the sea remembers more than we do?" You smile. "It never forgot, we're the forgetful ones." He tilts his head, and the hum. It's memory trying to wake. When you leave England, you head west, across an ocean that once drowned an empire. The voyage is slower than your first, yet calmer. You stand at the prow and realize, you no longer fear the depths. At night the Atlantic sings, a low chorus of whales, wind, and something older beneath them all. The stars look close enough to touch, and for the first time you feel the distance between heaven and sea collapse. The hum is everywhere. Not a song now, but a constant undercurrent, a heartbeat too large for any one age to contain. You whisper into the wind, still building. The waves answer with foam that glows faintly gold. Yes, always. The ship reaches the new world, but for once you don't go ashore. You stay at the railing, eyes on the horizon where sky and sea blur together. You realize that maybe there was never a city at all, only a chord struck at the dawn of time, still reverberating through human thought. Atlantis didn't sink. It diffused through us, through art, through science, through every act of creation. And maybe, when the last note fades, the builders will wake again, not to raise walls, but to remember that everything we build is a way of returning. The hum swells, the sea burns softly gold. You close your eyes, and this time you hum back, not as echo but as harmony. Section 13. Dawn rises over a sea that looks newly made. The air tastes of salt and copper like something being forged. You've been drifting for days, weeks, maybe, since that last night of gold-lit waves. The world has quieted, even the gulls are silent. Somewhere beneath, the hum trembles louder than ever, like a great engine waking from sleep. The ship you sailed on is gone, though you don't remember it sinking. You're afloat on a patch of calm water where the ocean glows faintly from below. The glow shifts and breathes, as though the seabed itself is alive. You take a deep breath, lean over the side and see them, structures unmistakable and immense. Pillars, arches, avenues, some upright, some half-swallowed by coral. The light dances across them in shifting blues and golds, and there, caught in the coral's embrace, lies a single object that catches the sunlight. A crown, forged from something not quite metal, not quite stone. Its edges shimmer like pearl, its jewels pulse faintly, as if remembering. You feel an ache in your chest, a sense of having come home to a place you never knew. You dive. The water closes around you like velvet. The hum grows richer, vibrating through your ribs. Every motion feels slowed, ritualistic, as if the sea itself is guiding you. You swim past mosaics of inlaid shells that glint like constellations. Faces carved into marble stare with blank serenity. Atlantean kings and queens, or perhaps only ideas shaped into human form. You reach the crown, brush away silt. A faint sound ripples outward, a chime so pure it silences the world. When you touch it, you feel not cold metal but warmth. Memory surges, images flood your mind. A city blazing gold under a sky of mirrors. Machines powered by sound. Children floating, marbles of light between their palms. A catastrophe of pride. A tower built too high, drawing lightning from the heavens. And finally silence, as water swallowed everything. But beneath it all, something softer remains, forgiveness. You break the surface gasping, clutching the coral crown. The world above has changed. Clouds have gathered, massive, violet, spiraling downward like the arms of a celestial whirlpool. Lightning flashes soundlessly within them. The ocean vibrates with the hum. You realize it's no longer something you hear, it's something you are. And then a voice, not in words but in resonance. It hums through the crown, through your bones, through the air itself. We are not lost, we became the tide. You turn slowly, eyes wide. All around, the sea erupts in light. Shapes begin to emerge from the depths, vast silhouettes rising like mountains, half-ruined towers, domes still gleaming, bridges made of coral and gold. The lost city is surfacing. Historians still argue whether Atlantis ever existed, but here it is, rising in defiance of every doubt, a cathedral of the sea coming back to breathe. You drift closer to the re-emerging spires. Fish scatter like sparks. Some of the structures hum in tune with the crown you hold, their frequencies aligning in eerie harmony. A current catches you, pulling you toward the heart of the rising city, a plaza surrounded by pillars inscribed with spirals and stars. At the center floats a dais made of translucent crystal. On it rests a sphere, the same material as the crown, glowing with the deep light of the sea. The hum peaks, then stills into one single sustained note. You understand it now not as sound but as intention. The Atlanteans never died. They translated. Their civilization turned inward, collapsing into pure resonance. Matter became vibration. Memory became music. And here you are, centuries later, tuned to the same key. You place the coral crown on your head. The light brightens, enveloping everything. When it fades, you're standing on the plaza's edge. The city is still half submerged, the sea calm again. The crown has dissolved into flecks of gold that drift away like pollen. Around you, the air smells of rain and salt and iron. You look down at your reflection and see faint blue light flickering beneath your skin. You've become a vessel for the hum, its keeper, perhaps its continuation. You laugh softly. Guess I didn't survive this one either. But you're still breathing, that counts. Days pass, though here, time feels more like tide than clock. The Atlantean ruins don't sink again. They remain visible for a while, like a dream that refuses to fade. Ships pass in the distance, their crews too far to notice. Only you hear the low tone reverberating from the stones. You explore, mapping with your hands, tracing symbols that resemble early Greek, early Egyptian, early everything. It's as if all languages grew from these curves. You realize how right the old scribes had been. The idea that Atlantis wasn't a single civilization, but the root chord from which all others took their tune. Every empire since, Sumer, Rome, Byzantium, was just an echo, a variation. The hum in your chest seems to agree. One night you climb to the tallest remaining tower. The sea glimmers below and stars spill overhead like powdered glass. You hum softly, matching the tone you feel rather than hear. The sound carries far, across water, across centuries. And somewhere in a faraway century yet to come, a satellite picks up a mysterious frequency from the Atlantic, a perfect harmonic impossible for random noise. Scientists will scratch their heads, arguing over tectonic plates, whale song, even alien transmissions. But you'll know. The Coral Crown's return wasn't a resurrection, it was a reminder. Atlantis never needed to rise again, because it never truly drowned. It became the resonance that guides every rediscovery, every leap of imagination, every human urge to rebuild after ruin. You close your eyes. The hum deepens, blending with your heartbeat until they are indistinguishable. By morning, the city has faded once more beneath the waves, leaving only smooth water and scattered flecks of gold dust. You float there, weightless, watching the sun climb through clouds. You whisper, "Still here." The sea answers with a faint shimmer, and then silence. But it's the good kind, the kind that hums just beneath hearing. You smile, let yourself drift, and for the first time since the beginning of the journey, you feel not like a wanderer, but like a note that has finally found its place in the chord. You awaken to static, not the hiss of sea foam or wind, but the sharp, electrical crackle of a modern storm. The hum is gone, at least you can't hear it, but the memory of its resonance lingers in your ribs, faint and rhythmic, like the aftertaste of thunder. You're lying on a shore paved not with coral but with asphalt. Streetlights blink uncertainly through the fog. Somewhere nearby, a car alarm wails and dies. The smell of gasoline mixes with salt air. The horizon is jagged with cranes, wind turbines, and the skeletal shapes of unfinished skyscrapers. You stand slowly. Your clothes are dry, your skin unaged, though the world around you has clearly leapt centuries forward. A newspaper tumbles across the pavement, its headline shouting, "Scientists to probe Atlantic Ridge, anomaly, sonar image sparks global buzz." So they've finally heard it. You walk toward the sound of voices, reporters clustered along a cordoned-off beach, microphones thrust toward a research vessel rocking in the surf. A marine geologist, hair tousled by the wind, is giving a statement. A massive structure beneath the mid-Atlantic ridge, symmetrical, geometric, roughly the size of Manhattan. The sonar patterns indicate it isn't natural. "Do you mean a city?" someone calls. The scientist frowns. "We mean something built." The crowd erupts with murmurs. Cameras click. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the air. It's not disbelief, but recognition, like hearing your name whispered by someone you haven't seen in years. You slip away before the interview ends. A nearby cafe glows with the comfort of light and steam. You order coffee, sit by the window, and watch the rain. The TV above the counter blares more coverage. Satellite images of the Atlantic floor, glowing blue-green outlines of domes and towers. Every talking head has a theory. Ancient aliens, advanced prehistoric civilizations, an elaborate sonar glitch. Historians still argue whether Atlantis was a moral fable or a geographical memory, but the new evidence is breaking their patience. You sip your coffee, smile faintly, and whisper, "You're late." The barista glances up. "Sorry." "Nothing," you say, "just talking to an old friend." That night, you can't resist. You find your way onto the research pier where submersibles gleam under floodlights like sleeping beetles. Security is light. Nobody expects intruders with curiosity instead of credentials. You slip into a small observation module, a sphere of glass and steel meant for one passenger. It lowers into the dark. The ocean embraces you again, familiar as a dream. As the surface fades, the monitors bloom with blue. Structures rise beneath you, columns, plazas, bridges wrapped in coral. The same city, the same light. Only this time the sensors capture it all in crisp, glowing detail. Your heart stutters. The hum is faint through the hull, but it's there, a low, pulsing vibration that syncs with the submersible's instruments. One of the gauges trembles off scale. The radio crackles with the voice of the control operator. "You're picking up interference. We're detecting a harmonic anomaly at weight. It's repeating itself." The hum grows louder, expanding into a full chord, then a melody. The water outside flares gold. And suddenly, every screen inside the module fills with images, not sonar data, but moving light, a vision. You see knights, cloaked in ocean blue banners, riding beneath stars. Sailors chanting over compasses that point to dreams. Scholars hunched over parchment, sketching spirals they don't understand. You walking through every age, hearing the same hum in every century's heart. The images collapse into light again. Your console flickers, short circuits, and dies. The hum resolves into one clear, crystalline tone that seems to speak directly through the hull. Remember, not rediscover. Then silence. They pull you up hours later, unconscious but alive. The scientists swarm, peppering you with questions you can't answer. The data is scrambled, unreadable. The anomaly has vanished from sonar as if the city never existed. They call it a glitch, a transient echo, a trick of light and signal interference. But you know better. That night you sit in a borrowed hotel room overlooking the Atlantic. You can still feel the vibration in your palms, faint as a heartbeat. The news reports are already shifting tone, from astonishment to skepticism. Atlantis has slipped back into legend, as it always does. You smile to yourself. "Good," you murmur, "sleep a little longer." Weeks pass. You move through the world quietly, following the hum wherever it surfaces. A museum in Berlin hosts an exhibit on mythic cartography, featuring the same medieval map you once saw in a candle-lit workshop. The curator mentions, offhand, that the ink used to mark the Western Isles contains a mineral unknown in Europe at the time. In a lab at MIT, a physicist demonstrates a new acoustic resonance machine capable of levitating droplets of water. "It's all about vibration," he explains. "Every structure has a frequency at which it forgets gravity. You grin, Atlantis would agree. He blinks, unsure if you're joking. Late one night, you find yourself on a quiet stretch of coast. The city lights behind you fade into mist. Ahead, the ocean hums softly against the shore. You close your eyes, listening. Somewhere out there, the coral crown lies buried again, waiting for another age to remember. Maybe in another 1,000 years, someone else will stand here, feeling the same pull, hearing the same faint resonance beneath the waves. You whisper into the dark. When nights dream of Atlantis, the dream always wakes them. A wave breaks gently around your ankles. For an instant, you think you see something gleam beneath the water, a reflection, or perhaps a relic, but it fades, leaving only the shimmer of moonlight. You chuckle softly. "All right," you tell the sea, "keep your secrets." Then you walk away, leaving faint footprints that the tide quickly erases. The hum follows, faint but faithful, not demanding belief, only memory. Because Atlantis was never a city. It was a story the world keeps telling itself whenever it forgets how to dream. And tonight it's dreaming again. The years slide by quietly. You keep moving city to city, coast to coast, like a needle tracing the grooves of an ancient record. The hum has grown softer now, a gentle pulse under everyday noise. Sometimes it threads through a bus engine, sometimes through the drone of an airplane, sometimes in the rhythm of your own breathing when you wake before dawn. You've stopped chasing it. The dream has already caught you. Tonight you find yourself on a windswept cliff in Western Ireland, overlooking an Atlantic dark as ink. The moon floats low and wide, gilding the waves. In the distance, wind turbines turn like slow clock hands. The air smells of salt, peat, and rain about to fall. You sit, wrap your coat tighter, and let your mind wander backward. You've walked through 1,000 years of curiosity and hubris, through candlelight, cathedrals, laboratories, and data screens. The hum, Atlantis itself, was always there, adapting to whatever instrument humanity built to listen. It's funny how progress always loops back to wonder. We invent compasses, telescopes, AI, sonar, satellites, and somehow they just point us back to the same question. What did we lose and where did it go? You smile, you know the answer now. We never lost Atlantis, we became it. A gust of wind rolls off the water, sharp and cold. You hear it, faintly, beneath the roar of the surf, the same low vibration that's followed you since the beginning. It feels ancient but not tired, like a choir note held just long enough to remind you that silence isn't absence, it's endurance. You close your eyes, listening. For a moment, everything aligns, the crash of the waves, the heartbeat in your chest, the soft grind of sand underfoot. The frequencies sync. You hum back just under your breath. The tone deepens, resonating through your bones. And then it happens. The cliff face itself seems to tremble subtly, as if acknowledging you. The sea shines faintly blue along the horizon. Maybe it's phosphorescence. Maybe it's recognition. You lie back against the grass and watch the stars. They look the same as they did when you first heard the hum, when knights still wore armor, when monks still mapped the edges of faith and sea. Humanity's monuments rise and fall, but the sky remains its quiet witness. You imagine the Atlanteans, those dreamers who turned sound into structure, who built cities from resonance and belief. You can almost hear their laughter in the wind. "Still dreaming," you whisper. And faintly in the rhythm of the waves, an answer, "Always." You laugh softly, then sigh. "Good, keep it going." Because that's what it was always about, wasn't it? The keeping, the remembering, the retelling. The hum is fading now, not in defeat but in rest. You feel it settle back into the sea, the same way a heartbeat quiets when sleep comes. You think of all those who will come after. Explorers chasing sonar ghosts, poets writing about sunken cities, children staring into tide pools imagining kingdoms below. The story will surface again because it always does. Atlantis isn't a myth to be proven, it's a mirror to be rediscovered. And well, you've carried it far enough. The tide's coming in. The night's growing colder, but there's comfort in knowing the dream continues without you. You whisper, "Sleep now," to the waves, and they whisper back, "You too." Your eyes grow heavy. The world around you hums once more, softer than breath. Maybe that's how every civilization ends, not with collapse but with a lullaby. A gentle promise that even after the marble cracks, even after the lights go out, the music never stops, it just changes key. You smile into the dark. "Still building," you murmur, the words almost lost in the wind. "Always." The hum answers once, warm, low, final. Then the ocean sighs and the world exhales with it. You drift toward sleep. The stars blur. The sea becomes a whispering floor of gold. And the forgotten empire hums beneath you still, endless and unbroken. The waves are soft now, slow, circular, hypnotic. Each one folds into the next like a breath turning inward. The night stretches wider, gentler, the stars dimming just enough to make the horizon vanish. You breathe in the salt air. It's cool and clean. Somewhere deep below, the hum quiets into a single note, a heartbeat of the world that promises it's all still there. The towers, the gardens, the memories. They've simply settled back into rest. The wind brushes over you like a hand smoothing wrinkles from a bedsheet. You let your shoulders sink into the earth. There's nothing left to find, nothing left to prove. Just the steady rhythm of the ocean and the pulse that answers inside your chest. This is how empires sleep, not in ruin but in return. Everything that was stone becomes sand, everything that was song becomes silence. But the silence holds shape, like a seashell remembers sound. You could stay here forever listening. The air hums faintly, the tide pulls close, even time feels drowsy now. And as your thoughts drift, half dream, half memory, you realize the story never really ends. It simply passes from one dreamer to the next. The sea sighs once more. You smile, eyes closed. The hum fades completely, replaced by the hush of sleep. Atlantis sleeps again, inside the waves, inside the world, inside you. Sweet dreams.